They called it the land of the free, but before the freedom, there was the fire. America, the most powerful nation on earth, a country built on ideals of liberty, democracy, and justice. But what if I told you that same nation was built on a foundation of genocide, slavery, broken promises, and blood? This isn't the version they put in your school textbooks. This is the real story, the dark story, the story that shaped everything. Before any European ever set foot on American soil, this land was alive, thriving. Over 60 million indigenous people called it home: the Cherokee, the Aztec, the Iroquois, the Sioux. They had cities, trade routes, governments, and culture stretching back thousands of years. Then, in 1492, Christopher Columbus arrived. Columbus is celebrated every year in the United States, but here's what the history books leave out. Within 50 years of European contact, roughly 90% of the indigenous population was dead, wiped out by disease, warfare, and deliberate extermination. 50 to 100 million people gone. Historians now call this one of the greatest demographic catastrophes in human history. Some scholars use a word that's uncomfortable but accurate: genocide. As the colonies grew, they needed labor, massive, brutal, unrelenting labor, so they turned to Africa. Between 1619 and 1865, over 12 million Africans were kidnapped, shackled, and transported across the Atlantic in conditions so horrific that nearly 2 million died during the crossing alone. These weren't cargo, these were human beings: doctors, farmers, artists, parents, children. They arrived in America and were sold like furniture, like animals. And here is perhaps the darkest irony in all of American history. The men who signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776, proclaiming that all men are created equal, more than half of them were slave owners. Thomas Jefferson wrote those words. He also enslaved over 600 people over his lifetime. The gap between America's words and America's actions would define its history for the next 250 years. By the 1800s, America had a vision, a destiny they called it, manifest destiny, the God-given right to expand across the entire continent from the Atlantic to the Pacific. There was just one problem: other people already lived there. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, one of the most devastating laws in American history. Entire nations of indigenous people were forced off their ancestral lands at gunpoint and marched hundreds of miles to barren reservations in the West. The Cherokee called their journey Nuna Dal Tsunyi, in English, the trail where they cried. In the winter of 1838, over 16,000 Cherokee people were forced to march through brutal cold. Around 4,000 of them, mostly children and the elderly, died along the way. And this wasn't an isolated incident. Over the following decades, hundreds of similar forced relocations occurred across the continent, wiping out entire civilizations and cultures that had existed for millennia. By 1860, the tension over slavery reached a breaking point. America went to war with itself. The Civil War. 620,000 soldiers dead, the bloodiest conflict in American history. And in 1865, slavery was abolished. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed like America might finally live up to its promise. It didn't. After Lincoln's assassination, a political backlash swept through the South. Jim Crow laws were passed, a system of racial apartheid that forced Black Americans into a second-class existence. Separate schools, separate water fountains, separate worlds. And if you tried to resist, the Ku Klux Klan burned your house, or worse. Between 1877 and 1950, over 4,000 Black Americans were lynched in the United States. These weren't secret crimes in the dark of night. Many were public spectacles, attended by hundreds. That is the dark heart of American history that most people never talk about. The 20th century brought 2 world wars, and America emerged as a global superpower, champion of democracy and freedom. But even in its finest hour, the contradictions didn't stop. During World War II, America fought against fascism and racial persecution in Europe, while simultaneously imprisoning 120,000 Japanese Americans in internment camps on home soil. Families, children, citizens locked up simply for their ancestry. President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the order. The Supreme Court upheld it. Then in the 1960s came the Civil Rights Movement, a revolution led by ordinary people who were tired of waiting for the promises of 1776 to actually mean something. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, John Lewis, they marched, they bled, they changed the world. But not without resistance, not without attack dogs and assassinations. And then came Vietnam, a war that America cannot fully explain to this day. 58,000 Americans killed, an estimated 2 million Vietnamese civilians dead. And when it ended, America simply moved on. So, why does any of this matter today? Because history isn't just about the past, it's about understanding the world we live in right now. The wealth gaps, the racial tensions, the political divisions, these things didn't come from nowhere. They have roots, deep roots. America is a country of extraordinary contradictions. It has produced some of the greatest scientific, cultural, and democratic achievements in human history. It has also committed some of the most documented atrocities. That's the complicated truth, and it's a truth worth knowing, not to condemn, but to understand. Because a nation that cannot face its own history is a nation that cannot truly heal. History is not the enemy. Forgetting history is. If this video made you think, hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe, because we're just getting started. I'll see you in the next one.